I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and welcome to Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. You know, we have a wonderful show scheduled for you today. Very important, actually, for everybody who's living in the area, especially in Peters Township. Let's welcome today Washington County District Attorney Eugene Vittone.
Good
Gene,
morning,
welcome
Ed.
back to Healthy
Thanks.
Pets, Healthy Owners.
Thanks for having us, Ed.
And Gene's assistant, who we put on the spot here and asked her to come on the show today, Hollie Zavallo. Now, these important people to our county here, they do a lot of work of keeping us safe, I think, first of all, but they do something that most people are not aware of, and that is they run the Washington County Drug and Alcohol Coalition. Gene is co-director along with Cheryl Andrews.
Right.
And this organization's been in effect how long, Gene?
3 years now we've had the coalition together. It's actually the Washington County Opioid Overdose Coalition. It was formed in November 2016, and it was a result of an effort that we've been working on for some time. Back when I first became district attorney in 2012, we noticed that we had a number of fatal non-accidental overdoses. There was a high number in 2011, and when we started looking into it, it developed that, you know, a lot of that was heroin. It was also related to pills, and many of the people that were dying were very young. So when we started looking at this, one of the first things we did is we started working in the schools with various summits where we were trying to educate and make students aware of the dangers of prescription medication.
Education is paramount, I think.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
When you know the facts, then you can make decisions based on those facts.
Yeah.
But what do you mean the association with prescription medication?
Well, initially the opioid epidemic originated. A lot of it was caused by the use of prescription medications they're called opioids. They're actually pain relievers, and they cause respiratory depression. If people use too many of them, they'll stop breathing and they will die. And that's what we were seeing initially. So we wanted to get out and educate the students, but what we found out we were doing, Cheryl Andrews, who's my co-chair of the Opioid Overdose Coalition, she's unable to be here today, but she's been phenomenal in helping us fight this. But we're doing a lot of different efforts, and it was more or less firefighting at that point, Dr. Sulkowski. We were seeing a problem when we were addressing it, but there was no cohesive overall plan. And that changed in November of 2016 when we started working with the University of Pittsburgh Technical Assistance Center. And basically we merged public health and public safety to form this coalition. And there's about 30 different groups. You're on it. I appreciate you being there. You're a resident dentist because a lot of dentists use analgesics in their practice. We have healthcare providers. We have the acute care facilities. Our local hospitals are there. Government's there, probation, parole, the courts, my office, obviously, the Bar Association, faith-based groups. Obviously, we have drug and alcohol providers as part of this, but what we did is pulled all these people together because it's a multifaceted problem. You're not going to solve this with one thing like just Narcan. Narcan keeps people alive, but you got to have that link to treatment. You got to have a continuum of care so that you're getting people that are addicted or have substance use disorder into treatment. So we developed a strategic plan. We have various committees such as interaction and treatment with justice, the Narcan committee, education and prevention. And the goal there is to reduce overdose deaths in Washington County. But it goes beyond that because we're seeing a rise in stimulant use now with cocaine and methamphetamine in our area. So we're also just trying to address addiction. And addiction is what drives most of what we see in the criminal justice system. So if I can get people, nonviolent offenders, into a program where they're being, their treatment needs are being addressed, and they're not coming back into my system and they're not committing new crimes, that's a win for me as a district attorney. So I said a lot. I'll let you.
Well, the coalition is organized out of the district attorney's office.
It's actually a group of people. We meet once a month. in the jury lounge. It's not the district attorney's program per se. It's actually Cheryl and I run it. She's with the Washington Drug and Alcohol Commission, and they're what's called our single county authority. They're a funding source for a lot of the programs we do, but they also do assessments. They do referrals to treatment. They help people find money if they can't afford treatment. So she's been a extremely valuable partner in our fight against substance use disorder and trying to get people help for addiction issues.
So what you're trying to do through education is prevent people from ending up into the jail system.
Yeah, that's the goal. Actually, our approach is threefold. One, get nonviolent offenders into treatment and help people get into treatment for substance use disorder. The second part of it is more law enforcement side, where we're actually trying to identify and prosecute dealers that are bringing dangerous drugs into our area. We've been extremely aggressive in that with our drug task force and our relationships with the high intensity drug trafficking area designation we recently obtained from the Department of Justice that gives us more funding to fight drug dealers coming into our area. And then the third part of it, as you mentioned, is education and prevention. We think that's key. Initially, we were doing summits in the schools, and these were kind of one-time hit type programs where we were talking to students about the dangers of drugs and addiction. But we found that what's more beneficial to educate people about the dangers of drug use is a more sustained effort where you're actually talking about things like having self-esteem, having self-confidence. You're trying to instill in students those reasons why they wouldn't want to go down this path in the first place. And those programs are evidence-based and they work extremely well, and that's what we've been focusing on.
And then Hollie, you're involved pretty heavily in putting on these educational seminars at the school. What does it take for someone to invite you into the school system or into their community to put on a educational seminar?
I think that, well, we have had a lot of schools reach out to us asking us to come there and do a presentation, but we've also reached out to many of them ourselves.
And its reception good from the different schools? It
was. We had a lot of demand for it. I feel like we've kind of like backed off of it a little bit because we've been doing, going a new route with it, but we definitely had a lot of interest in it.
So there's a difference between the illegal drugs and the drugs that are prescribed by the medical field. What is that difference? And
well, initially what kicked off what we call the opioid epidemic, and this is well documented, and there's several good books on it. The one I recommend is Dreamland by Sam Quinones. He's actually was an investigative reporter with the LA Times. But what actually kicked this off, a lot of this was the overuse of pain medications in the late 90s and early parts of this century. And it's actually pretty well documented that we were putting out too many analgesics. There were too many opioid analgesics were being used, and people weren't being appropriately monitored for whatever reason. And then they turned, when they couldn't get the analgesics, when they started backing off on prescribing the analgesics, they would turn to heroin or fentanyl. The third wave of this was excuse me, about August of 2015 is when we encountered it here in Washington County, and we made the front page of the Washington Post by our first experience with the fentanyl. And we were one of the first areas in the country, and it's probably because of the proximity we have to interstates and where we're located. We had a number of people overdose and several died from fentanyl.
So what
at
exactly
that time
is
period.
fentanyl?
Fentanyl is a very powerful opioid. It's anywhere from 30 to 50 times more powerful than morphine. It's extremely dangerous because you have people that, these aren't pharmacists putting this stuff together. These are people that are just mixing things, and they could put it in pill form, or they can put it in baggies, as we see in this county. They're called stamp bags. They're actually very small bags. And it doesn't take very much of this stuff to kill somebody. There were various, there's about 30 or 40 different types of fentanyl that's out there. They vary in potency. Carfentanil is the one people hear a lot about. It's actually an elephant tranquilizer. That's what it was developed for. It was never developed for use in humans. And you had people putting it into these stamp bags, and it was getting out in circulation. It was killing people. So, but getting back to my original point, you have various, when they mix this stuff, they're not necessarily making sure that the mix is appropriate or that this is even a drug that's appropriate for human consumption. So a lot of this stuff was getting on the street, and then we were seeing clusters of people dying from it.
So in Washington County, is it centered more around the city of Washington, or is it spread throughout the whole county?
What we've seen with the, and that's, I'm glad you mentioned that, Ed, because it's something I want to also point out. One of the things we weren't doing prior to the coalition was looking at data. Now we're looking at data, and we're matching our strategies to what we're seeing with the data, and we're trying to use strategies that we beg, borrow, or steal from any other area of the country. So we have about 30 different initiatives going. So getting back to your original question, when we look at the data, and the data is available on a website called overdosefreepa.org. When we look at the data, we see it all across the county. I mean, as far as overdoses, they can happen in many areas. We see them in Donora, we see them in Cecil Township, we see them in Peters, we see them in Washington. They're pretty much scattered throughout the county because anybody can become addicted to and have a substance use disorder. So it's pretty much prevalent throughout the county, as it is across the nation. I mean, we're not like unique in that respect. Our nation's suffering from this overdose problem too.
So when these pills, these analgesics, which are basically painkillers, they trick the mind, when they were brought to market, the drug companies were professing that they weren't addictive, or they had a very low addictive capability.
Yeah.
Well, we found out that not to be the case. So these were being prescribed with really no limits. You could prescribe for 30 days, 60 days, whatever. That's all changed now because of the awareness.
We've learned a lot. Initially, as you said, Ed, the prescription medications, as I understand it, were being marketed as extended release. And the fact that they were a timed release was supposed to lower the potential for abuse of these medications, because morphine and opium have been around for centuries. I mean, they've been used for pain relief for a long time. What changed was the extended release nature of these medications. And initially, yes, the physicians and healthcare providers, as I understand it, were being told that these medications, because of the extended release nature of them, there wasn't as much of a risk for people to become addicted to them. There are several lawsuits, well, many lawsuits that are being filed right now. It's in the news right now, where the drug companies, it's alleged that they found out pretty quickly that that wasn't necessarily so.
And then covered it up.
Well, I don't know what they did, but that's something that'll be settled in lawsuits, I'm sure. But one of the things that also changed was how we looked at pain as a vital sign. There are things that you can look at and objectively measure. You know this as a healthcare professional, like your blood pressure, your pulse, your respirations. Pain is a very subjective measurement. I can't see. I mean, I can look at you and tell, if you're in distress, but I can't really see, and give you a number for your pain just looking at you.
One person has a lower tolerance, another person has a higher tolerance.
Right.
To pain.
So this caused, and physicians, they weren't that well schooled in analgesics. That's not to take a knock at physicians, but they learn a lot of things. Now they're being educated in that. In the medical schools, there's curricula designed to educate physicians on that. We also have what we didn't have a couple years ago, a prescription medication database, which was fantastic. That came out in 2015, 2014. And now you as a healthcare professional know what another doctor or another dentist
And that was a
or
big
somebody
problem with
is-
all medications,
Right,
because
right.
you would go to different providers and
Sure.
no one knew what the other one was giving you, and a lot of these interact. But it really flared its ugly head with these opioid addictions.
Right,
And now it's tracked. And
Right.
as a provider, before I can even write a prescription, I have to go on to the website and look,
Exactly.
or otherwise I'm held accountable. So that really has tied a lot of those loose ends up.
Yeah, and physicians are well-meaning individuals. They try to help people. That's why you go into the business. And when you don't have that information, when you have that information deficit, it makes it very difficult to prescribe for somebody. So we were actually, for a period of time there, prior to the medication database coming in, our area was basically a source for medication for people that were seeking out of Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky. I remember one case where we actually had a group of individuals, there's about 10 people, and they were hitting various pharmacies all the way over to Franklin County, Chambersburg. They were getting people, they were filling prescriptions from people here in Chambersburg. They were up in Du Bois, and they were just filling these prescriptions because we didn't have a system of tracking that. That's now been rectified with the prescription medication database, so that you as a healthcare provider can know exactly who's being prescribed what.
Yeah, you should get an inclination of your patients that come in and you know they're shopping for this stuff. You know, you have enough experience to pick that up. But it's hard to tell, as you said, when someone's truly in pain. There's some diagnostic tools you could use.
Right.
But if they say they're in pain, how do you say you're not in pain? You know, your back's hurting you. How do you say no, it's not? You
Right.
know?
Right.
But what the public probably doesn't realize is practitioners learn about medication from the sales reps that come in from the drug companies.
That's
true.
true.
You're taught about it in school. You're taught how to write a prescription, but you're taught of the chemistry, the biochemistry of medication, not so much about every specific purpose for every pill that's out there. You learn that as the representative comes in. So when these representatives were coming in with this data saying that these opioids were non-addictive, as a provider, you have to trust the people that are providing the information to you. But it's actually become full circle now, because people were being put on the opioids, and then at a point in time, the practitioners were saying, "Hey, you've had enough," you know. Then it goes into the illegal side of things, so it becomes some vicious circle.
Right. And I've met a number of people through my job as district attorney. I see them in court. These are people that had good jobs or ran businesses, and they became addicted because they got hurt on the job. They hurt their back or whatever. Got addicted to the pain medications, and when the pain medications were shut off, they turned to heroin on the street and trying to get opioids through another route, be it an illegal route. So, and Ed, you mentioned sales representatives. Full disclosure, I was a drug rep.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
In the 80s, I actually worked the veterinary side, but we used a lot of the same medications. In fact, I was just at a paramedic recertification class over the weekend, and one of the meds they were talking about is ketamine, which is now being used in place of opioids for pain relief, and there's actually a shortage of it, I guess. And I used to sell that to veterinarians back in the day. So
You've had a
legally.
you've had a varied career here. You were a paramedic at one point.
Right.
Was that
Still am.
What you're
Yeah.
still?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still certified.
What brought you into that field?
Well, what brought me into what field?
Becoming a paramedic.
Oh, well, that was, I did that when I was very young. I mean, I started in 1980 as a paramedic, worked for 20 years. But it's, the range of experience I've had has actually prepared me very well for what I'm doing now.
Absolutely. You go from being a healthcare provider to a drug rep basically,
Yeah.
selling medications. then you became an attorney, became a DA, and now you're working heavily to prevent people from going to jail over drug issues.
Yeah,
it's kind of amazing.
It puts me in a unique position to, kind of walk between two worlds, medicine and law, and hopefully provide some insight into how we can address this issue. Because, I tell people all the time, as district attorney, I'm not fighting a war on drugs. I mean, that's never been my focus. My focus, because I know this from looking at my data on who's coming into court, my focus is fighting addiction. That's what I'm fighting, because about 90% of what we deal with in the Washington County Court of Common Pleas is addiction. A third of our cases are alcohol. I mean, a lot of those cases are just DUIs. And that's people that have an alcohol problem or an addiction to alcohol. We get a lot of stimulant use. We have cocaine. That's always been prevalent throughout the county, and we've been addressing that. And with heroin and fentanyl, that's also an issue. So 90% of what we're dealing with is substance use disorder. So it only makes sense to me to have that public health, public safety partnership with Cheryl Andrews over drug and alcohol, so that we can link people. And these are nonviolent people. I'm not talking about people that are coming in for Philadelphia and selling fentanyl
Make
on the
that
streets.
difference. Explain the violence and the nonviolence.
Well, obviously with the illegal drug trade, you have a lot of violence associated with it. We try to identify, and it's sometimes it gets a little confusing, because you're dealing with people that one day they may have drugs, one day they may not have drugs, and they're providing drugs to their friend. We try to identify nonviolent offenders, people that aren't in it purely for greed, that aren't poisoning the community. They haven't come in from the other areas of the country, and they're not looking to sell great quantities of this stuff on our streets. And we try to get the nonviolent offenders into the diversion programs. We have about 7 different diversion programs, from the magistrate's office, drug court, Medicaid diversion. We have a Vivitrol program in the jail, which has been working fantastically, which is treatment in the jail. And then the more serious guys, we try to deal with a different way. We try to get them off the streets and get them away from the public and quit causing damage.
In the years in past, if you had some type of drug offense, you generally ended up in the system at some point in time, the jail system.
Well, actually, it's interesting, Ed. That's true to a certain extent. When I started looking at our death data a couple years back, what I noticed is about a third of the people that were dying had never had any interaction with our system at all. Whether they were victimizing their families and it just never was reported, which happens from time to time. We see that with elder abuse cases. And then there was a third, it broke roughly into thirds. There was a third, they never had interaction. There was a third, they may have had maybe a small amount of marijuana that was reduced down to disorderly conduct, or a minor offense, a minor drug offense. And then there was a third that, these were the people that were in our system a lot. So 2/3 of the people that were dying, these are the people that are no longer with us, had basically no contact with our system, or a relatively minor contact with our system. So what that taught us is, even though it's a relatively minor offense that we may be seeing, we want to try to give them the opportunity to get with somebody that can give them help, and see what we can do to get them into treatment, and see if we can help resolve that issue.
Yeah. Hollie, as the assistant to Gene, the district attorney of Washington County, I'm sure you take most of the calls before he ever gets them. What have you seen change? Are you having people calling in and say, I know someone that's addicted, can you help?
Yes, that is definitely, I actually have that call. I have, my son, has a court hearing. He really needs to get help. Can you force, some kind of rehab on him? I actually get that call a lot. They would rather see their child in jail or in rehab rather than be on the streets where they're able to continue to use.
Do you have other people reporting on people as well?
Yeah, We do, but it's mostly family.
Mostly family who are concerned, and they've done everything that they can, and with no resolve to
They're
it.
just exhausted, and they know that it's going to be fatal if they don't get some help.
And that happens from time to time. I know through meetings with the coalition that stories have been told where they knew their family member was addicted, and they tried everything under the sun, and the result was death of that family member. And to hear some of those stories and what mothers have gone through and so forth.
It is such an exhausting life.
On the upside, though, I've heard the same stories from people that have gone through addiction and have come out of it, much to your programs that you're offering in the county.
And that's always a great story whenever you, I know that you've listened to some of the stories of the recovering, whenever we've had the different events, and some of the stories are just so heart-touching,
Well, just how brave these people are to have gone through that and then wear it on their sleeves and try to help other people and help prevent them from experiencing the same lifestyle that they went through. I mean, losing their kids, have their kids taken from them because they weren't fit anymore to raise their children and so forth, and then
living
getting
under
them
a
back.
bridge.
Yeah.
I believe that one
Yeah.
lady was telling us about living under a bridge. And
Yeah, it's amazing.
yeah, the stories. When you get to see the positive outcome, it makes you feel like this was for something,
Absolutely.
And seeing the decrease in the overdose deaths, that that makes you know you're doing something right.
We're going to take a break right now, and we'll come back and get into further depth about what's going on with the coalition and what we're doing here in Peters Township as well. We'll be back on Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners with District Attorney Eugene Vittone and his assistant, Hollie Zavallo. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we're in the middle of a wonderful conversation with District Attorney Eugene Vittone and the District Attorney's assistant, who we conned onto the show today. We kind of ordered you on, didn't we, Hollie?
Yes.
Hollie Zavallo. It's always a pleasure to have you two on the show, and you go into such depth as to what we're doing in Washington County and actually how this coalition that you formed, along with Cheryl Andrews, your co-director, is actually the model for the whole state of Pennsylvania.
We've received a lot of attention, and that's it's very nice. But the work is what we focus on. I've had the ability to go to other areas and talk about how important coalitions are, because initially when this hit, there wasn't much support from the federal government. I mean, the federal government did a white paper in about 2011 that basically advocated Narcan, improving the prescription medication database program, and doing education and prevention. But the funding was limited. There wasn't much funding that was being put out to help people that needed treatment, or even for law enforcement to stop the threat. At a state level, there was a lot of disagreement. You really couldn't get the cohesion that you needed to form this. So what we looked at several years ago was, look, we have resources here. We have good, well-meaning people. We have volunteers that were willing to step up and help from many different areas of the county, many different representative groups. Why not tap into that experience? Why not tap into those resources, pull it together, and try to do something on a local level? And that's what the impetus was for the coalition, and working with the University of Pittsburgh with their ability to the Technical Assistance Center through Peru, being able to use their resources to analyze data, to map that data, and to give us a direction on what we need to address. That's what formed the strategic plan. That's what formed how we're addressing this. So yes, it's nice to receive attention for what we're doing, but the important thing is the mission of reducing overdose deaths, reducing substance use disorder in Washington County, and that's what we're focused on.
Well, we mentioned this briefly in the first half of the show, but I think we need to go in a little greater detail because really your life experiences and the decisions you made professionally have really set you up in the perfect position to be doing exactly what you're doing here in Washington County. So I'd like you to kind of give us a little more in-depth review of your background. First of all, starting as a paramedic. Let me say something. First of all, you were born and raised here in Peters Township.
Right. I'm from Peters Township, graduated from Peters Township. I was in the first marching band of Peters Township.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So you stayed home, basically.
Right.
And you became a paramedic.
Right.
So what was your interest in actually to become a healthcare professional?
Well, at that time, I was in school at the University of Pittsburgh, and I was a volunteer fireman with the Peters Township Fire Department. Paramedicine at that time, EMS, was in its infancy. It had arisen in the late 60s, early 70s. Johnny Gage, Roy DeSoto with emergency.
Well,
it seemed to be a pretty exciting.
We have another Pennsylvania resident here, Dr. Dennis Courtney, who was at the forefront of all of that with the ambulance services.
Yeah, actually, Pittsburgh itself, with Freedom House Ambulance and Share here in Washington, were one of the first services to actually put trained individuals that could administer life-saving drugs, that could do procedures that used to be limited to the emergency room in the field. So what Freedom House eventually became the City of Pittsburgh EMS, but it was a organization that took people that needed jobs at that time. I forget the name of the federal program that they utilized, but they trained them to administer these skills because back then, prior to the EMS being developed, people were basically being thrown into squad cars or they had hearses. I actually worked out of a hearse. Our early ambulances were hearses. They were Cadillac hearses, and they were pretty difficult to work out of the back. But back before EMS really developed, that's how the things operated. It became a much more structured system. Now we have advanced life support. We try to use evidence-based strategies. A lot of the things I was doing in the 80s, I just did my recertifications, examinations. A lot of what we learned in the 80s is now disregarded. They've learned that things that we're doing were probably counterproductive. So now they've changed them, and we're working off data there. But it's a rewarding field. We're hurting for paramedics and EMTs right now in the state of Pennsylvania. A lot of that work was volunteer work. I worked with the ambulance service here, VFW 764, before I went to ambulance and chair. And I was the assistant director under a wonderful lady, Billie Jane Morris, who was one of the founders of this field. She's been involved with EMS since 1962, and she does it for the right reasons. And she's always been very much at the forefront of making sure that people in Washington County get the best care possible.
And this all started in this area and spread across the country.
Yeah, it started in this area. A lot of it was due to the popularity of the TV show I mentioned, Emergency, which obviously, you're showing your age if you remember that TV show. I guess it's still on rerun. But I did that for about a long time. I'm still a paramedic. I was in the field up until about 2002, working with various ambulance services in the area. But one of the things that caught my eye in 2012 when I was elected DA was, I never had a non-fatal accidental overdose in 20 years and thousands of calls that I was actively in the field. So we had them, but they were rare. I mean, I think Coroner Worko's data indicates in 1992 we had 2. We had suicides, obviously, where people intended to kill themselves and they used drugs. But we didn't have what we have now, which is people that don't intend to die, that are using drugs, and they end up dying because of the drugs that they're using. So it helped catch my eye in 2012, and that's...
We were discussing this a little bit during the break, how synergistically your life pattern has worked to place you in this position to be so effective. So you moved from the being involved in EMS as a paramedic, and then went into the drug industry.
Yeah, I was actually doing both at the same time. I was a pharmaceutical sales rep for about 5 years in the 80s, working for a veterinary division. I called on veterinarians in 3 states. A lot of the drugs are the same. Interestingly enough, in veterinary medicine, there's a much more of a emphasis on prevention. So they use a lot of vaccines to try to prevent livestock. Obviously, if you have livestock that gets sick, it costs you money if you're a producer. So they want to make sure that they're more engaged in preventative medicine than what you would see on the human side. But it was a good experience learning about how pharmaceutical companies operate, exactly what you were talking about, where the representatives going in and talking to the professionals. They do rely upon you for information. And one of the things that I learned in that job was I darn well better be on my game as far as what I'm telling somebody, because that is what they're relying upon. You have to be honest, you have to be truthful, and you have to be representing the data and the research and what your product can do in a correct and honest way, or you're going to cause problems. So I also obtained my master's in health administration at the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public Health about that time, and then I looked at law school and I went to law school. So Ed, I wish I could tell you this was my goal, was to be district attorney in 1980, but it's been a unique path. I wouldn't trade any of my experiences for what I've learned along the way. I think it's really put me in a very good position to understand and address what we're facing
Absolutely,
now.
and plus in a great networking position too, because you're affiliated with all these different aspects that are involved in this drug problem that we
Right.
have.
It's worked out very well, and again, we have wonderful partners on the coalition. I don't know what I would do without these folks. They volunteer their time. They're in at 8:30 in the morning once a month to come and share with us their ideas, their perspectives on what they think we should be doing. They're looking at the data from their silo, their work, so they're able to offer us a perspective we may not have, that we would not see because we're in a different area. So it's very rewarding to work with these individuals, and I thank each and every one of them for giving of their time and doing it. Once a quarter we come out and we do public meetings so that people know what we're doing, that they can see if they wish to participate, because I don't pretend that we have all the answers. Like I said earlier, I've been notorious, I guess you would say, for looking at other ideas from across the country and bringing them into what we're doing. So, and maybe even shaping them to do something different. So we keep looking for other avenues to pursue.
Does Washington County interact with all the surrounding counties?
Yes, I do from a law enforcement standpoint, obviously, but one of the nice things about having the relationship with the Technical Assistance Center is that there's probably, I think the latest number is there's about 30 counties with coalitions like ours at various stages of development. We're able to interact with them through the Technical Assistance Center at the University of Pittsburgh and offer them support as they go along. We're one of the oldest, obviously, and just being 3 years old, we're going to be developing our next 3-year strategic plan here in November and December, because we've hit a lot of the landmarks we wanted to hit with our original plan, and we want to take it a little bit further.
So Washington County was probably one of the first in the state to come up with this coalition and bring all these people together.
Yeah, and in the interest of full disclosure, I got to tell you, it's kind of amusing. Back in early 2016, we were doing a lot of roundtables. Pretty much every politician that came through Washington County wanted to have a roundtable on the opioid epidemic. Cheryl came to me with the idea of joining the coalition, forming a coalition in November of 2016. And God bless her, because I thought, oh boy, this is another roundtable. This is the last thing we need. People want to see action. We're at the point, we've talked about this enough. We got to have action. And I went very grudgingly to the first roundtable meeting, and I wasn't as nice as I usually am, but boy, am I glad I did, because it really turned into something that I never realized it would be. It's not an academic exercise. What we're putting out there isn't just something that's pie in the sky. We're doing it for PR reasons. This is a working coalition of 30 different organizations that's developed a plan. We have 30 different initiatives going on right now. We're developing new initiatives. We've discarded things that we didn't think work. We've added things that we're hoping will work, and we're maintaining things that are working. So we've seen a drop in overdose deaths. We hope to continue that trend. I'd like to get back to where I was in the early 90s with, it's a rare occurrence. But to do that, we have to address substance use disorder and addiction, and make sure we get people help.
Washington County is showing a decrease in deaths from drug overdose.
Yeah, we had a decrease last year. I'm anticipating one this year. We've had a recent spike. We're still seeing a lot of stimulant use in Washington County, which necessarily isn't as lethal as the opioid overdoses, but it's every bit as devastating to the person that has it, as far as the effect on family, their jobs, and the community.
Let's talk about a few of the programs that you've implemented.
Sure.
So there's the Narcan program. What is
Right.
Narcan, and what does the program do?
Narcan's, I equate it as similar to the automated external defibrillators that people have out there for people that go into cardiac arrest. They're called AEDs also. Narcan is not treatment per se to get somebody away from a substance use disorder. What Narcan does is Narcan keeps somebody alive for that minute. These drugs, the opioids, what they cause if you overdose, what an overdose is, as I understand it, is respiratory depression. And if your respiratory depression goes to the point that you're not breathing, obviously if you don't breathe long enough, you're going to die. What Narcan does is it reverses it blocks the effect of the opioid on the receptor sites so that you don't go into the fatal respiratory depression. Having used this stuff, I can tell you it's a very dramatic thing. You can look on the internet and see people have been reversed with it. It's like you're literally bringing them back from the dead.
So it's a nasal spray.
The one we're using in Washington County right now is a nasal spray. We have about 3,500 kits that are out there. Initially, when we provided these to first responders, I was using drug forfeiture money, so it didn't cost the taxpayers money to provide Narcan to people. But the important thing there, and I talked about a continuum of care earlier, is once you reverse somebody, you have to get them into a continuum of care so that they're hooked up with a provider and they get help, because that's a lethal event. I mean, that is a signal event that this person, if they don't change, if they stay on this course, is going to die.
Well, even if you get them administered with Narcan, there could be other complications, so they need to go right to the emergency room at that point.
Yeah, they need to be seen. One of the things, as I mentioned, I recently went through some recertification stuff for my paramedic certification. One of the things that we're seeing is our population of people that are dying is like 16 to 25. It's kind of bimodal. It's like the high end and the low end. And I'm in the high end, so it's 45 to 60. We're seeing people dying in that range. When you see somebody go down, even though they have a drug history, you can't assume that it's an overdose. It may be cardiac related, so one of the things we're working on is a newer program to basically get people trained in life-saving measures. We're anticipating a 45 to 1 hour program where we're teaching hands-on CPR, Narcan, and also stop the bleed, because a lot of people, if they suffer trauma, what's killing them is exsanguination. Yeah. So we want to make it something quick that we can put before a community group, and it's something they'll retain so they'll actually use it. And it's actually out of the state of Washington. I was talking to a fire chief out there, and he has a program developed. It's called Act to Save a Life, antidote, CPR, and tourniquet to stop the bleed. So it's an interesting program we're looking to do as part of our Narcan training. We have other programs going on, Ed. I don't know which one you want to go to next.
Before we get to that, let's talk a little more about this Narcan. So, is it available to anybody?
Yes, anybody can get it. You can get it through the pharmacy without a prescription. You can also contact the Washington Drug and Alcohol Commission,
So that
and they can provide it.
So you'll talk to Hollie first. Is that usually what's happening?
They can check in with Hollie. Do you have a problem with that?
No, no,
Okay.
no. Actually, a lot of people do call me for it.
Yeah, I thought so. That's why I mentioned that, Hollie, that you're getting a lot of calls of people asking for Narcan, and they just have to come to the office and pick it up. Is that what happens?
Normally, or else I will direct them over, depending on the quantity that they would need, either at our office or the drug and alcohol.
And then the push is to get providers to have it. All police officers carry Narcan,
Yes.
and EMS people carry Narcan.
Yeah, and fire personnel have been fantastic also. We've had approximately 440 reversals with Narcan by first responders since July of 2015. It first became available to first responders and the general public. Well, first responders, it was late in 2014 that the statute passed. Prior to that, you had to have a medic give it, or you had to go to the emergency room to get it. Now, with first responders having it, we're able to get people reversed, because it's a similar situation as when somebody's in cardiac arrest and you want that AED on them. You only have so much time when somebody's not breathing or the heart isn't working to get them reversed before they're going to die.
And it really doesn't require medical training.
No, it's pretty easy to use. It's
Just kind of like a nasal
up
spray.
the
You
nose
yeah.
as a nasal spray. It's very easy to use.
So they have these little kits with 2 nasal sprays in a kit. Is that correct, Hollie?
Yeah, the drug and alcohol has been providing really nice kits. I wish I would have brought one with me, but it's got gloves in it. It tells you how to use it if you need to, because in an emergency situation, people, sometimes you get tunnel vision, and
Sure.
you need to focus on what you're doing, and that'll help too. So, but the important thing, it also has a card in there on how to get them into the continuum of care situation, because Sherrill has people based at the local emergency rooms. It's called a warm handoff, where they actually have treatment people available at the emergency room to talk to people that are coming in that have been reversed, so that you can get them into that system.
So no one's passing judgment. They're there to try to help you overcome the situation.
Right. And even when people are in court, Ed, I mean, when we have somebody in court that we're working with, it really doesn't matter to me. It doesn't help with my determination on what to recommend to the judge. If they got addicted by a physician that wasn't monitoring their opioid medication, or they were out and they took pills and they liked to party or whatever, the bottom line is whatever drove them to be in my courtroom needs to be corrected. And if that's a substance use disorder, then we try to get them into a diversion program. Judge DeSalle, John DeSalle runs a wonderful program in Washington County. It's our treatment court. We established that in late 2004, 2005, where it's a longer program where people are in that program for 2 years. They're monitored by the judge, they're monitored by drug and alcohol, they're monitored by probation. And they come to see the judge frequently. I think it's 2 times a month. And he monitors their progress with their treatment provider and tries to make sure that they're doing the things they can do. And they're staged, as to what their treatment needs are as they go through this. And they help them with work, they help them with housing, and more importantly, they help them address that substance use
And that's another
disorder.
part of your program.
Well, it's not part of my program, but it's something we use a lot.
Judge DeSalle's been on
Judge
this
decides-
TV in the past. I'm threatening to get him on here again as soon as he has some time.
Yeah.
But he's another Peters Township resident.
He's another Peters Township resident, Peters Township graduate, and he was in the marching band also. But John, Judge DeSalle has really embraced the treatment concept behind treatment court. There are numerous studies that indicate the effectiveness of that approach, drug court approach. It's one of the most effective things that you can do in the criminal justice system to help people break the cycle of going into jail. committing new crimes and going into jail.
What this addiction means is your body's actually craving this.
Yeah,
And-
you have a physiologic
It's a
dependence
chemical
on
dependency.
and there with the opioids, we've learned, and I don't pretend to be an expert on it. I try to learn as much as I can from people that are experts on this. But basically, there's an interaction in your brain. You have your prefrontal cortex, which is your decision-making part of your brain. It handles your executive functioning, why you do the things you do, and why you don't do things that you shouldn't do. But it's also tied to your limbic system, which is the pain, the pleasure center of your brain. And a lot of people, when they take opioids, it's basically the limbic system. I had one person explain it to me as like the gas, and the prefrontal cortex is the brakes. When you get addicted, when you end up needing these medications to have a normal life, it shuts off that front part, and that's why people do the things
And
they
sugar,
do.
sugar does the same thing, actually. It works the same way. So people become addicted to sugar. The same
Yeah.
way they get the same effects, actually.
Yeah.
Very quickly, because we're running out of time here, and we want to talk about what's happening here in Peters Township this month of October. But what program do you do actually in the jail for people that have come into that system?
One of the things that's really worked out well for us, we're using Vivitrol in the jail.
And that is a medication?
Vivitrol is a non-opioid blocker. What it does is it blocks the receptor sites that would be looking for opioids, so that if you take an opioid, it's not going to work for you. What we've learned, that's called medically assisted treatment. There's 3 drugs that are used in medically assisted treatments. Subutex, buprenorphine, which is an opioid, methadone, which is the one that's been out there for a while, which most people are familiar with, and Vivitrol, which is a non-opioid blocker. The nice thing about Vivitrol is that it blocks the effects, but we did more than that with our program, and this was where our interaction with Pitt comes in handy. They suggested to us that we actually move treatment into the jail, because we know the best outcomes are achieved for people with substance use disorder if you combine medically assisted treatment with the behavioral modification that needs to be done at the same time. And we're still developing this protocol. I mean, there's a lot of, we're learning as we go along, because there was no playbook for this stuff, Ed, when it started.
Yeah.
So we've moved treatment into the jail. They're sitting there anyway. They're a captive audience. We start working with them on behavioral modification, and there's different modalities we use. And that's essentially the same stuff they would be receiving if we sent them out of jail. Prior to this program, what was happening is we were discharging people from the jail to treatment programs. Well, treatment is different depending upon your insurance. Some people were getting 28 days. That's pretty much standard. Some were getting 45. And then there was some that were getting as little as 7. With an opioid dependency, 7 days is basically a detox. That doesn't get you
So
where you
you
need to
have
be.
them in jail. They're able now to rehab in jail.
Basically, that's
Yeah.
the thinking. It's worked out well. We use it a lot with people that have been recommitted for probation or parole violations. A lot of those people are just heroin.
We're going to run out of time. So
Sure, I'm sorry.
What's happening in Peters Township?
What's happening in Peters Township is October 15th. It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Did I have the date right, Ed?
I
At
believe
6
so.
o'clock.
Hollie's the one
You
to ask.
do?
At 6 o'clock, we're going to have our public coalition meeting. Anybody that's interested in addiction, treatment strategies, what we're doing in Washington County is invited to attend. It's going to be at the rec center. We're fortunate to have Dr. Six, who's the medical director, chief medical officer up at Washington Hospital. He's coming to talk about medically assisted treatment, how people can get better with opioid and addiction issues. And we encourage the public to come. We'll have a drug take back. If you have prescription medications, bring them with
Bring
you.
them
We
in.
can-
So instead of throwing them in the trash or down
Yeah.
the drain, you want to bring them and hand
Yeah,
them
and the
in.
Peters Township Police Department has a take back box that's available during business hours too, if you missed that.
So again, the date is
October 15th. It's a Tuesday
at 6
at
o'clock
6 p.m. at the rec center.
at the
So
Peters Township Rec Center off of Bebot Road.
you'd love to see everybody come out and learn a little bit about this problem. So
I think it's so important for our community, and it's wonderful that I know Hollie had a big effort that she made to get the rec center to host it for us. A lot of effort on your part to get that in there.
Well, they were really happy to have us, but we've been really trying to target this area. I feel like this area, you know, we needed to have a presence in this area as well. So normally they're held in Washington.
Also, I wanted to mention, you've been a district attorney since 2012?
I've been in the office since 1998. I've been an assistant, and then in 2012 I was honored to be elected district attorney.
So it's an elected position. How long is that position?
4 years.
So you're up for election this
Yeah,
year?
I'm seeking my third term.
Awesome.
So I want to keep the good work
Great
going.
success. You're doing a wonderful job
Thank you,
as
Ed.
district attorney.
I
And
appreciate
you're
it.
doing a wonderful job for the communities in this county.
As
I
I
think
s-
for the whole state.
I have great partners like you, Ed, and I
Oh,
appreciate it.
I
Thank
do a
you.
little. I think Hollie's a way greater help than I am. Thank you so much, District Attorney Gene
Thank you,
Vittone and Hollie Zavallo from the District Attorney's Office, the District Attorney's Assistant. Thank you so much for watching Healthy Pets, Healthy Owners. Remember, a healthy pet is a happy pet. When you're happy as well. And you can hear us live every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on AM 1250, The Answer, on Healthy Pets, Healthy People. And the District Attorney is going to be on that show in the future here. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gene.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate
Hollie,
it.
thanks.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. We'll see you next time.